Since the dawn of time, man has always been inquisitive, asking the big questions. Why are we here? Where do we come from? What's our purpose in the universe? Yeah, well, that's all good and fine. But the stuff I'm curious about are things like, why do clocks run clockwise? I mean, if they ran the opposite direction, that would now be clockwise. How come our eyes always close when we sneeze? It's nearly impossible with your eyes open. Or why do you sometimes see a lone shoe lying on the side of the road? Where did it come from? And what happened to the other shoe? Those are the sort of things that keep me up at night. And if you've always wondered about this kind of stuff too, well then, welcome to our podcast.
It's the Always Wondered podcast.
Hi, I'm Rick Peterson. Thank you for joining us. And we begin with something that many of us use every day. Mouthwash. Now, we know what it does, but have you always wondered how mouthwash came to be? Well, we'll try and answer. But first, we need to fire up the old Wayback Machine. We're heading all the way back to the 1800s. In the mid-19th century, surgery was a pretty nasty business. Back then, doctors didn't yet understand the importance of a clean surgical environment. Unfortunately, it led to a lot of infection and a lot of death. Enter Dr. Joseph Lister. We owe him a lot. He was an English physician that pioneered the idea of sanitary surgical practices that are still employed today. Thanks to Dr. Lister, cleanliness in a medical setting became a big deal. So in the late 1800s, a couple of guys, including a pharmacist named Jordan Lambert, developed a disinfectant to help clean surgical instruments. In fact, they honored Dr. Lister by naming their product after him. Yeah, you guessed it. Listerine. Aha! But don't think the story ends right there, because it would be several more decades before anyone ever dreamed of gargling with this concoction. The Lambert Company marketed their surgical tool disinfectant to medical professionals, and they achieved some mild success. But through the years, they tried to expand their reach, even offering Listerine as a floor cleaner. Now let's fast forward to the time around World War I. And in a stroke of marketing genius, the Lambert Company started promoting their disinfectant as a cure for halitosis, commonly known as bad breath. Now, up until that time, the public hadn't thought much about bad breath, but the power of advertising changed all of that.
Jane has a pretty face. Men notice her lovely figure, but never linger long, because Jane has one big minus on her report card: halitosis. Bad breath.
In the end, Listerine became a huge success and spawned many competitors, and the rest is oral hygiene history. So the next time you use mouthwash, know this: that Listerine formula has pretty much stayed the same over the last 150 years. That's right, the same stuff that was once sold as a floor cleaner. Yeah, you might want to rinse and spit.
The Always Wondered podcast.
Whenever you drive the U.S. interstates, take a look at the road number. I-55, I-80, whatever. Maybe you've always wondered how they come up with those numbers. Well, they're not just random. They mean something. And we'll tell you the story. Hop in. Our first stop is 1919. Young Lieutenant Colonel Dwight D. Eisenhower. Yep, that Eisenhower was part of a U.S. Army experiment. The idea was to send a military convoy from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco to see how long it would take to move an army cross-country. The results were not great. With a hodgepodge of rough roads, decrepit bridges, and the like, it took 62 days to complete the trek, and you thought your commute was bad. But that convoy would make a lasting impression on Eisenhower. So in the 1950s, now as president, Ike understood the importance of a good network of roads that would last a lifetime. So the U.S. interstate system was born.
We had to have these roads to meet the economic growth, the population shift, and the defense needs of our growing country.
The plan was to lay the roads out in something of a transcontinental grid. Expressways generally running north and south would end in a 5. Those numbers would then increase from west to east, starting with I-5 on the west coast, then I-15, I-25, and so on, ending with I-95, which pretty much parallels the eastern seaboard. Meanwhile, east-west roads would end in a 0, starting with Interstate 10 in the south that travels from Santa Monica, California, all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. The farther north you get, the numbers increase. I-20, I-30, continuing up to Interstate 90 in the north that travels from Seattle to Boston. It was a logical system that was designed to help make traveling and navigating easier in an age when GPS didn't exist.
I wonder if you could tell me how to get back on the expressway.
Of course, as the population grew, the need for more highways grew, so not every number could end in a 0 or 5. And to help avoid congestion, bypasses and connectors were built that consisted of 3-digit numbers instead of 1 or 2. But the big takeaway is this. If you're on an interstate that ends in an odd number, you're generally heading north or south. The higher the number, the farther east you are. And if you're on an interstate that ends in an even number, you're typically heading east or west. The higher the number, the farther north you are. Of course, no matter which direction you're going, chances are pretty good that you'll get stuck behind a semi in one lane and some jerk on his phone in the other. And if you always wondered why that's the case, well, I got nothing for you.
It's the Always Wondered podcast.
At this podcast, we're always going to try and give you the whole 9 yards. We recognize the phrase the whole 9 yards as meaning everything, the entire lot, all the way. But where does that expression come from? If you've always wondered, you're not alone. Some people may think it has something to do with football. But that doesn't make any sense because a first down in football is 10 yards, so the whole 9 yards would mean failure. So football? During World War II, certain aircraft machine gun belts were 9 yards long. So maybe that's where the expression comes from. But as it turns out, the expression was in use well before the war. So once again, now others have theorized that maybe it means cubic yards, since the volume of some concrete mixers is about 9 cubic yards. But again, the timeline says otherwise. So maybe the most plausible explanation has to do with fabric. As far back as the 1800s, fabric was sold on bolts that sometimes consisted of 9 yards of material. So if a tailor or seamstress had a project that required an entire bolt, they could have easily said,
"I'll take the whole 9 yards, please."
Of all the explanations given, that makes the most sense. So we'll give that a tentative. The true story may have been lost to history, but the jury is still out. So if you have an idea, feel free to contact us and we'll share it. After all, we're here to give you the whole 9 yards, even if we don't quite know where it came from.
The Always Wondered podcast.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Hopefully you learned a little something along the way. We'll leave you with one more to ponder. Have you always wondered why cat hair sticks to your clothes more so than dog hair? Hey, sorry, no offense, just bringing it up. Maybe we'll discuss that next time. Until then, I'm Rick Peterson. Thanks for listening.
The Always Wondered podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and a review. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. Feel free to offer suggestions for future topics or simply reach out to alwayswonderedpodcast@gmail.com.